And now we bring you Killer Wives, Episode 5, The Caregiver. These are the actual case facts of Nikki Capello, nurse and wife of 8 years, who lethally poisoned her husband to death. Isn't trust a bitch? A nurse from Huntsville, Alabama, whose job it was to save lives, has just taken her husband's life. Huntsville, Alabama, famous for NASA and the U.S. Rocket Center, but also for the murder of one Mr. Jim Capello.
This is Charles Rivers, and welcome to edition 5 of Killer Wives. Nikki Capello, an Alabama nurse addicted to pain medicines, steals drugs from work and uses them to kill her husband. Our story starts on September the 21st of 2018, when Nikki Capello files a missing persons report on her husband, James, who goes by the name of Jim or Jimmy. His co-workers had been contacting his wife asking about him because he didn't show up for work, which was unlike him. When they went to check on him at the family's home on Lauderdale Road in South Huntsville, she would not let them come inside the house, but they could see Jim's car in the driveway there. Mere months prior to his murder, James Jim Capello, age 37, a native of Lockport, was planning an intervention for his wife, Nikki Capello, age 32, who he feared had grown heavily dependent on prescription drugs and opioid muscle relaxants. She had used prescription medication for years to control pain from a fall she sustained years earlier at work. Nikki often had trouble keeping her eyes open because of these opioids and addictions, and sometimes dozed off during holiday parties and family meals together. But Jim Capello never did get the chance to hold an intervention for his wife. Why? Jim was found dead, lying on a tarp, facing up, with his feet partially on the floorboard of the passenger side of their family car in the couple's Huntsville, Alabama home on September 21st, 2018. Police say Nikki Capello poisoned him with a lethal level of insulin that she had illegally obtained from her work as a nurse at a local hospital. Excess insulin in the bloodstream causes cells in your body to absorb too much glucose being sugar, and this from your blood. It also causes the liver to release less glucose. These two effects together create dangerously low glucose levels in your bloodstream. This condition is called hypoglycemia. Therefore, when you either inject or induce insulin into a bloodstream of a person that does not need it, depending on the dose, blood sugar would go down. It would drop precipitously, either a bit or crash, causing seizures, a hypoglycemic coma, and if attended to, leading to death. If a person becomes unconscious due to too much insulin, like Jim did after being poisoned by Nikki, his life could have been saved by Nikki. She was a nurse. Nikki knew exactly what to do to counteract the effects of too much insulin. But she didn't do that. Nikki wanted Jim to die. See, all people on insulin would have a glucagon available. It counteracts the effects of insulin. Now, family members or emergency personnel will typically need to inject it. Glucagon is for people's hormones produced by alpha cells of the pancreas. It works to raise the concentration of glucose and fatty acids in the bloodstream and is considered to be the main catabolic hormone of the body. It is also used as a medication to treat a number of health conditions. Its effects is opposite of that of insulin, which lowers extracellular glucose. So, in layman's terms, she lowered his blood sugar to a dangerous level where humans' life could not be sustained. This was done purposely. She was a nurse. She knew what would happen. Now, oddly enough, Jim would have found the same bottle earlier that month and took a picture of it to send to a friend for clarification in the investigation of his wife's drug habit. But you will never know Jim unless we go back to his past, before he met Nikki, back to his childhood. Jim Capello and his sister Jamie Wiest, who was 2 years older than Jim, grew up with their mother Kathleen Capello in a home on Royal Parkway in the town of Lockport, New York. His sister said they did fun things together, like playing in the dirt together, or throwing laundry baskets at one another when they were mad at each other. She said they would take magnifying glasses and burn ants with them, just for fun, just like any other kid. Jim, by all counts, enjoyed his childhood, and he could be seen in his spare time enjoying sports and driving all-terrain vehicles and snowmobiles on land that bordered his mother's Lockport home. He was said in his teen years to be a diligent employee of the local McDonald's there, where he logged many hours as a crew member. Everybody remembers Jim as a positive, laughable person. This was young Jim's first job in the late 1990s. Later on, Jim moved to Albany, Georgia with his mother, while his sister Jamie stayed in school at Niagara County Community College, where she had enrolled in a nursing program. This would become part of Jim's history. Their father, James Capello Sr., remained in Western New York, as did much of their extended family. At age 15, Jim Capello was in the 10th grade at the same time. He worked a series of odd jobs in Georgia and Panama City, Florida, where he later moved, and he enjoyed his new surroundings. He later attained his GED, moved to Northern Alabama, and began working as a private investigator at Posey Investigations for local attorneys in his area. Now, the family would remain close and even vacation together in such places as Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Jim Capello married Nikki in the year 2010. What Jim didn't know was that he only had 8 years left to live after marrying Nikki. Nikki was said to be always giggly and bubbly. Jim could have made her laugh all the time because he was that type of comical person. Jim's sister, who was also a nurse, recalls that Nikki and she would eat together at lunch every day, or when they had the time, and sometimes even go to the mall together. She says even back then, Nikki Capello was using various prescription medications for chronic back pain. It was said that over the years the couple were together that Nikki got more flat in personality and began to lack expression. None of this could be hung on Jim, but on Nikki's abuse of painkillers and her own personality. There was not much enjoyment left in her, Jim's sister said on one interview. But early on in that relationship, Jim's skills as a detective combined with an entrepreneurial bug would not allow him to rest as an employee. And I understand that, because entrepreneurism is where you receive life in life. As an employee, it kills your spirit. So in the year 2012, he decided to open up his own investigation business. He was known to have put in upwards of 60 hours per week to keep that business thriving, and it improved his family's financial backing. The name of his business was Capello Investigation Agency. And over time, Jim had worked his way up to be a well-known investigator about his town, and his death was said to have stunned the entire community. Jim was said to be an avid car enthusiast who loved working on his Corvette housed in his garage with his daughter, Riley. Riley was said to have played with bubbles from the car soap when Jim washed the car, and he taught her several things about cars, like this is an engine. So, as a father, he was also known to have taken Riley to feed ducks at the local pond and collect rocks to paint together. Riley was only 4 years of age and most likely home when her mother poisoned her father. Sadly, Riley would have been in the home, but unaware during the 2-day period that her father lay dead on that cold garage floor. Drug use. By 2018, Nikki Capello's prescription drug use had grown so severe that her husband began an investigation into his own wife's life. Jim suspected his wife was using painkillers and anxiety medication that she was not prescribed, and things were on the verge of getting out of control. Jim wanted his wife to seek help, but if she would not enter treatment for substance abuse on her own, Jim Capello might have to seek divorce and custody of their daughter Riley. He secretly went to Nikki's family for support in staging an intervention. He thought it better to elicit their help as they were closest to her. Upon leaving their home that afternoon, he asked him not to tell her until he finalized his plans. But it is believed that they told Nikki anyway. Jim would not live long after this meeting with Nikki's family. But at this point, Jim was desperate, and Riley was getting older. So Jim did not want his daughter to grow up in this type of deleterious environment. But no one could foresee, ladies and gentlemen, and I mean no one, Nikki murdering her own husband as recently as their daughter's Riley's 4th birthday, which had just passed. What would conspire next would be a downward slope to Jim's absence in his daughter's life permanently. By mid-September, family members began to notice Jim Capello was becoming mysteriously ill. Jim had texted his sister shortly before the end of her shift on that Thursday, the 19th of September, 2018. His text included the message that he did not feel well. His sister said, "Hold on. I'm going to be off work in about 45 minutes, and I'll call you then." So she called Jim on the way to her car, and after talking to him a short time, he passed the phone to Nikki. Nikki Capello, a registered nurse herself, assured Jim's sister that she was aware of his problem and that she would take care of him and make sure that he saw a doctor the very next morning. Jim would never get a chance to see that doctor because he died that same night at the hands of his wife with his daughter in the next room. That very next day, Jim Capello didn't show up to work. On Thursday, the 20th, his sister, concerned about how he made it through the night, texted Jim, but got no response. She then called him twice that day and got no response. So she chalked it up to the fact that he was always a workaholic and just too busy to return calls at the time. Jim's mom put in additional calls to him with equally no response. So Jim's mother texted Jim's sister to see where her brother was. Jim's sister then called Nikki on the phone as to whereabouts of Jim. But the only thing she came away with from that conversation, which was a sense of uneasiness, she definitely believed that something was off about her. Jim's mother, who lives in the same town as Jim and Nikki, then called police over to her house to fill out a missing persons report on her son. She handed the phone to police officers with her daughter on the opposite end, so that her daughter could give an account of the conversation she just had with Nikki. So, by September the 21st, Jim Capello's colleagues, friends, and family members suspected he was missing. That same day, Nikki Capello filed a missing person report on her husband. But why? But she neglected to move Jim's car from the outside driveway. This was the first thing Jim's work colleagues thought upon visiting the house. Nikki would not let those colleagues into that house as they were let in before, because she knew that Jim's body lay dead on the garage floor. But to fellow investigators, if he were truly absent wouldn't his car be also? However, on September the 22nd, Nikki telephoned her girlfriend Crystal Anderson and confided into her that Jim was not missing after all, but that she had actually killed him with insulin and that she needed her help to come over and dispose of the body. Crystal told Nikki not to worry, that she would have someone come over to the house and help her with that body. Crystal then put Nikki on hold and called the police and told them exactly what Nikki had just confided in her. A patrol car came over to the house. And what did they see? What did they do? That patrol car was sent to the residence. One officer went to the back of the house, while the other officer went to the front of the house to deny her escaping. The officer that went to the rear of the house noticed a freshly dug shallow grave. The officer that arrived to the front of the house rang the doorbell and asked Nikki would she step out and talk for a minute. He reported that he could smell the strong odor of a dead body wafting from the house at that point. He asked if he could come in and check the house out for Jim's presence. What happened? The officer that went to the rear of the house noticed a freshly dug shallow grave. The officer that went to the front of the house rang the doorbell and asked Nikki would she step out so he could talk to her. He reported that he could smell the strong odor of a dead body wafting from the house at that point. He asked if he could come in and check the house for Jim's presence. At that time, Nikki told them that they could check the house, but not the garage. Since she did not give permission to have that garage checked, a search warrant was requested. Other officers arriving on the scene clearly smelled a decomposing body. This was proof positive that Jim had been dead for a while. Now, people oftentimes refer to this as the smell of rotting flesh. Technically, the odor associated with a dead body after 2 or 3 days is a result of the gas being expelled by a process of bacteria consuming the body by way of the process of decomposition or decomposing of human organs first. So once the police armed with the search warrant entered the house, they found Jim's body dead on the garage floor. Nicole was then taken to criminal investigation for questioning. Over this time, Jim's sister and her husband were still en route to the house from Florida, and they had no idea what had just transpired at Jim's house. So imagine you're rushing to a place to give assistance to your brother and form a search team, and by the time you get there, to find out that he's dead. Still believing Jim Capello was missing, his sister and her husband, Chris, drove that September the 22nd from their home near Jacksonville, Florida, all the way for 9 hours nonstop to northern Alabama. Along that journey, they called several police departments, media outlets, search and rescue groups. They called search and rescue teams with dogs that find missing people to assist them in finding her brother. His sister is quoted as saying, "We are going to have the world's largest search party." But as they pulled up to the front of the Capello's home in southern Huntsville, a detective pulled them aside. It was then that his sister and her brother would no longer be family. Her husband learned that Jim was not missing, but dead on that cold and darkened floor of his own garage. Over those last couple of days, even prior to his belief of being missing, Jim's sister texted Nikki about a Christmas present for Riley, and she texted her back, "I'm sure she'll enjoy it." So while the guy was laying dead, Nikki, his wife, texted back to his sister, "I'm sure our daughter will enjoy the present you have for Christmas." Investigators had obtained a warrant, searched the home, and found Jim Capello's body on the tarp in the garage, as I said. According to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, his feet were on the floorboard of a car, as though someone had tried to move him into the vehicle. It is believed that she knew that the investigation was drawing closer and that she was going to remove his body from the house. If not by burying him in his own backyard, by some other means. I mean, who would expect anything wrong if they even accidentally saw Jim riding down the road with his loving wife, alive or dead, in the passenger seat? Because of this, Nikki Capello was taken into custody that same afternoon she was arrested. At the police station, the lead detective spoke to Nikki, which was on the date of September 22nd. Nikki called a close friend named Crystal Anderson and confided in her that Jim was not really missing and that she killed him with insulin, and asked her to come help dispose of the body. He talked to her. After a brief pause, as she put Anderson on hold, investigators said that she came back on the line and told Anderson not to worry about it. After all, that she had another friend that was coming to help her. So the officer recanted this entire conversation back to her. Anderson then called police to report everything because she was concerned. Huntsville police have been working to verify the identity of the other person who was allegedly coming to help Nikki from the conversation. Now, patrol officers responded to the house. If you remember, one officer went to the backyard and the other went to the front to cover all the exits and entrances. So she's being informed of this story to see how she responds to it. The officer in the front asked Nikki to step out of the front porch to speak to him, and when she did, he smelled the odor of a decomposing body. He explains investigators got there and the officer DeNoon testified that he could smell a dead body as he approached the house. So what was Nikki going to say? What excuse was she going to use? So he spoke to Nikki and asked her if he could look inside of her home, and he said she became very nervous. He asked her for consent to search, and eventually she agreed, but told him he could not look in the garage. Why? She knew right away that they would find his body. If she didn't know by the smell that wafted from the home with over 2 days of him lying on the garage floor, she knew that the gig was up. HPD obtained a search warrant and found Jim's body on the floor in the garage. Okay? So with his feet in his own vehicle, if she didn't know he was dead, if she didn't kill him, then why did she call the police to get his body out of there if he died from natural causes? It is odd. So, DeNoon had a brief conversation with her and told the court that she acted like nothing had happened when she arrived or when he got downtown. He asked her, "You know I went inside. You know I found him, right?" She responded, "Yes. I knew he was there." So, Marjorie Nikki Capello waived her arraignment and pleaded not guilty. She was subsequently released on a $100,000 bond. She was able to return back to the same home that she had murdered her husband in just a few days earlier. Fortunately for her, her daughter Riley was able to be taken in and live with Jim's loving sister and family of 4. Daughter Riley has been in the care of Jamie and Chris Weiss, who have 3 children of their own, 2 6-year-old twins and a 7-year-old boy. She's given us a lot of motivation and strength when it comes to all of this, Jim's sister said. We see my brother in her. My brother was a goofy sense of humor, and she's just like him. She's trying to get everybody to laugh. We feel honored, she said, to take care of her. Investigators went to the hospital where Nikki worked as a charge nurse. Co-workers that knew Nikki intimately said she was very open about the fact that she was having problems with her husband, and reportedly told them that the only way she would be free of him would be if he was dead. Hospital staffers also went back through medications and found that insulin was indeed missing, with no record of any patient needing it. There was nothing to indicate that Jim or Nikki needed insulin for any health reason. DeNoon, the detective, said Nikki claimed she accidentally brought a bottle of the insulin home from work. After a short talk at CID, DeNoon read Nikki her rights, and she requested an attorney. Of course, in all these cases that I bring you guys, there's a killing. The woman claims she had no knowledge of it, even if it's in her own home. And when they get her on the spot, she always asks for an attorney. Police indicated that surveillance from the Capello home has been set to the FBI forensic lab for analysis. Phones, computers, and tablets were also taken, per the search warrant. Jim's sister and father, Jim Capello Sr., sat in on November 15th's preliminary hearing, during which many details of Jim Capello's murder were revealed for the first time. And they were pretty gory. It was pretty intense, but I'm glad it's going to be over. Glad we're going to be able to move on, Jim Capello Sr. told an affiliate news channel after the hearing. We want to be a part of the whole thing. He didn't deserve this, but he deserves justice. When an indictment charged Nikki Capello with murder was unsealed, Jim's sister cried tears of joy. She said, "We're very happy to see that justice is being served and that the ball is rolling," she said. "We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. It was a good step. But the family's ordeal is far from over." Nikki Capello is scheduled to stand trial early in the year 2021. The original trial was set to start in the year 2020, but due to delays of the COVID pandemic, it got moved to next year. If convicted, she could face a life in prison sentence. Jim's sister said she hopes to learn at trial what pushed Nikki Capello to kill her own husband. Nikki's co-workers had reportedly told investigators that she was having problems with her husband and that the only way she would be free of him would be if he was dead. That is known. That's the only motive the family has learned so far about what she did. But in these cases, who could ever know? Who would ever know why a woman would be married to a guy for 8 long years? They had recently bought that home that she killed him in. Their income was going up. He was trying to help her get off of drugs. So Jim's sister said she wonders how Nikki Capello might explain Jim Capello's death to Riley, their daughter, when she is old enough to understand. She's going to have questions when she gets older, we said. And I just wonder how she's ever going to explain this. This year, the estate of James Capello filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Nikki Capello and the North Alabama hospital she worked at during the time of his death. Jim's survived sister said this lawsuit is another avenue for her to do something for her niece Riley and her brother. "If you would have asked me 2 years ago, I would have thought this would be all done and over with," said Jim's sister. Out of bond right now, Nikki, the wife that killed her husband, is out on bond, and she's walking the streets. The complaint alleges Nikki Capello stole the insulin that killed her husband, James, from the hospital. It also accuses the hospital of negligence and lack of supervision. What happened to the insulin? How come nobody knew that insulin was missing the whole time? She says, "I'm doing this for my brother. He's given me the strength, and I'm just fighting the fight. I hope that one day we can get that answer," she said, adding the couple had just bought that house, as I told you, and had no history of domestic abuse by either side. "I don't think the prosecution has the answer. What led her to do that? Or anything," she said. His sister says, 2 years after the incident, "I don't know. I knew anyone who was capable of murder." She didn't know anybody. Who was capable of this? Who knows anybody who could do this mess? Jim's sister recalls speaking to her brother for the last time on September 19, 2018. She said he told her he wasn't feeling well, a comment he was making often in the weeks leading up to his death. Jim's sister speaks of having custody of the couple's young daughter, Riley. She went from having 2 parents to having no parents at all, and now a mother of 4. She is very loved by us. She does have a lot of questions. She said Jim's sister answers Riley's questions as best she can. She says her and her husband comfort the young girl through hugs and listening when she wants to talk about what happens. She says that many times she feels saddened, but they comfort her. Will League is the attorney representing Jim's estate in a wrongful death suit filed on Riley's behalf just Monday. In Alabama, wrongful death, there's a 2-year statute of limitations in which the claim must be filed for an indictment. So last Friday, or arguably this Monday, will be the 2 years from that date, League said. The suit targets Nikki Capello and her employer, the hospital, at the time of Jim's death. The suit claims Northern Alabama Specialty Hospital failed to supervise Nikki Capello and safeguard the drugs she is accused of using to poison her husband. That being a vial of insulin, which could not be taken out of a hospital by an employee. Lawyer Weiss said the lawsuit is aimed at ensuring justice is served, while also making sure Riley is financially taken care of as she grows up. Weiss added that hoping to see a guilty verdict is what drives her to stay strong. Having something for Riley and her future for the rest of her life and making sure all her dreams come true is just the icing on the cake, but Nikki has destroyed a lot of lives for life, and she doesn't deserve freedom. Nikki is out on bond, but Weiss said she has not tried to contact with her or Riley. There has been a GoFundMe account that has been set up by friends and family for her daughter, Riley, and we provide links for that in the description below. So, I'm Charles Rivers. Join us next time on Killer Wives as we expose how wives literally love their husbands to death.